country, but I spent my adult life in the city, and as a creative and someone who wanders the city and is inspired by where she lives, increasingly interested in weird and decaying facades and the sort of the palimpsest that I'd see on the sides of buildings, and so thinking about, well, why am I attracted to those kinds of things, or maybe not something you would naturally think of, but also because I do am drawn to a natural environment, and thinking about, well, why are we so naturally interested in those organic shapes, and so what's the kind of correlation, and as I drive north of the city and I see those suburban developments, no offense to suburbanites, but totally reviled by them, and thinking about, well, why is that so awful, and why is this appealing to me? And so I think one of the things that I kind of came to was that the idea that those things, those suburban environments, are so perfectly right angled. There's no diversity. They're all the same. There's this sort of cookie cutter element to them. So back to this sort of idea of what do I find interesting in the city is that sort of when the right angles start to fray, and there's an age and a weathering, and it might seem like it's an imperfect kind of thing, but to me I find it very aesthetically interesting and pleasing, and you'd be surprised what you can find, and as the city does sort of change and alter and age, it's just, to me, that's sort of where I can find interesting inspiration. And so when I was on a trip recently in LA, and I was walking, and I saw this concrete wall, this piece here, this image rather, and I just sort of liked the color and how simple it was, and I found it very elegant. Well, it's bird shit, so you never know what you're going to see and what's going to inspire you. So there you go. From bird shit to Michael Snow. Sorry, Michael Snow. It's this idea that this sort of fraying and fragmenting, but there's this pattern. And so to throw in the chaos theory part is the sort of idea that in nature, and certainly in this kind of context in an urban environment, there's this apparent randomness and chaos, but underneath there's this pattern and there's this order, and I think that's that tension that's particularly interesting and interesting to me. And with something like this sort of weathered chair, and you've seen in a lot of interior design in the last 10 years, a sort of contrast and tension between old, weathered, aged things and the sort of more modernist, sleek thing. So Wabi Sabi is something that I came across kind of in the last few years, and I read an article and I thought, aha, this is perfect. This is an articulation of what I'll even kind of rattling around in my brain. So Wabi Sabi, very briefly, is as you see here, sort of the idea of a humble beauty. It's the idea that things are earthy and incomplete, never finished, and it's that imperfection where beauty can be found. And so again, that's something that I find particularly interesting and relevant to the work that I'm doing. So in things like this vase, there's this inconspicuous aspect to it that I find really interesting. Or in this example, where you've got the material quality of the metal and its natural materials. It's the idea of, I think the next slide is, well, I guess I shouldn't tell you what the next slide. But it's the idea that it's those natural qualities coming through as sort of a quietness, I guess, and it's compared to something like modernism, which is polished and sleek, and Wabi Sabi is sort of earthy and imperfect. And it's in those observing those kind of things in the urban environment, for me anyway, I find particularly inspiring. And one of my favorite things is this kind of idea of concrete, and then you can still see the wood part. And then in this image, I was traveling in the Bay of Fundy and saw this shed, and I got really excited because, again, it's this peeling paint, which is great, and up close it's very random and chaotic, but of course it has that horizontal, lines of the wood, which creates that really great structure and order, but at the same time this great tension between the two. And so then use this, and I thought, well, this would be a great idea for a textile, and that's what I spend a lot of my time doing is thinking up of interesting ideas for textiles. So I took that idea, and then similarly, the same kind of thing, walking through the city, and I think this was also in LA, just happened to look down, and the concrete, which probably was pristine at some point, had become weathered and kind of mossy, and so the sort of trowel of the concrete, again, kind of creates this really interesting pattern, which I thought, again, would be awesome as a textile. So, ta-da! So then I created, and you know, one of the things that I love about this too is that, you know, it's not perfect. So I'm using linen, which is naturally kind of very raw and rough, and even in the printing I'm doing, it's not perfect, you know, and that's okay. And when it is imperfect, even better in my book. And then sort of as my work's been evolving, this was taken in Montreal. I love seeing, you know, these big sides of old buildings, and they, to me, remind me of abstract paintings. So my work sort of evolved into this kind of area of thinking about textiles in a more abstract, slightly less kind of pattern-ordered kind of way. And so then I've taken those and then created these textiles, which are a bit more like abstract paintings, as I said, and using kind of simple color palettes, and created this bench to kind of illustrate this idea. So it's continuing this sort of search and fascination with this sort of order and chaos. And so basically the idea is that anywhere you are, you can coax beauty out of ugliness, essentially.